Dean Smith is a third-generation Los Angeles native. He earned his BA and MA degrees in political science from the University of California at Riverside, and then had a 34-year career in public service with Los Angeles County and has been retired since 2004. Dean is a member of the Civil War Trust, commander of the General W.S. Rosecrans Camp No. 2 of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, a charter member of Logan's Brigade, an affiliate of the National Women's Relief Corps, a former member of the board of directors for the Drum Barracks Museum, and best of all, he is president and program chair for the Los Angeles Civil War Roundtable, so I can relate to what he has to do to keep things going. He has given presentations to all 5 Southern California's Civil War Roundtables, including several here in Pasadena, on a variety of Civil War topics. So would you please welcome our speaker, Dean?
Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening to hear my talk on John Logan. I hope you'll learn something from it. When I started this, I didn't know anything about Logan except that he was a Union general, and he was a man given credit for starting what we now know as Memorial Day. So I got this little biography of him written by a man named Conwell in 1884 when Logan was running for vice president. Most of the book is about James Blaine, who was the presidential candidate. As you can see, I got quite a few post-its on the Logan side. And then I got this biography written in 2005 by Gary Eckelbarger. And if all of these had turned into quotes in my talk, we'd be here for weeks. In fact, my first script was 58 pages, and thought I could do a page a minute, and I started reading, and I got to page 24, my hour was up. I've been editing it ever since, including early this morning. Because of the time constraints, I'm going to kind of go through this. I'm not going to hit all the points on my slides. So what I learned from these biographies that Logan was really a famous and fierce Union general. He was also a popular politician. But what I got at the end was this amazing transformation of the man, particularly because of the Civil War. And that makes this really an extraordinary story. Sadly, like my other heroes, Rosecrans, Garfield, Harrison Griotis, you may have heard my talks on those 3 gentlemen, they were all forgotten by history as well. Eckelbarger says Logan may be the most noteworthy 19th century American to escape notice in the 20th and 21st centuries. So, John Logan's father, Dr. John Logan, was John Logan, so our John got the nickname Jack or John, and later he was called Black Jack because of his dark hair and dark complexion, and you'll learn about those other, some of them derogatory nicknames later on. So there's the farmhouse he was born into. On February 9th, 1826, his father was a successful medical doctor as well as a farmer, a horse trader. He owned a hotel and operated that, and he was a successful politician. To understand Logan's transformation, you need to understand where he came from. You can see he was born down here in southern Illinois. That's in the South. And the people that moved there, so people that came to southern Illinois came from Georgia and Carolinas, northern Illinois, they came from New England, so the state was split pretty much like the nation. But Logan absorbed the culture of the people that he was familiar with. His father actually owned slaves before they moved to Illinois. Dr. Logan wanted all of his children educated. He brought in tutors and he sent them to boarding school. He particularly wanted John, his eldest, to be a doctor. But at some point in time, he said that, John, you just don't have the sense to be a doctor. Jack found out he definitely didn't want to be going to medicine, but he was very much attracted to his dad's new job, which is a politician. He was in the State General Assembly for 4 terms. But one of Jack's talents when he was a kid was playing fiddle, and he got annoyed at his neighbor because he was up on her fence playing one day, and she came out and reprimanded him, saying, "John Logan, what do you expect to be when you are a man?" And he said, "Congressman of the United States." And he kept on fiddling. Young John was also a fighter. He was a gambler. And he rode his dad's horses in races. According to Eckelbarger, one witness to the races on Logan Track insisted he never saw Jack lose a race there. And that was good training for him in the war, as you'll see. So at age 21, Logan, being a patriot, enlisted in the Army for the Mexican-American War. He had to do it in Williamson County, where he met Captain John Cunningham. While visiting the Cunningham house, Jack was introduced to Cunningham's 8-year-old daughter, Mary. The proud father said, teasing Jack, "If you distinguish yourself in the war, I'll let you marry Mary." And that's how he met his wife. So in the war, Logan was appointed 2nd lieutenant. He was a quartermaster. The regiment never got out of New Mexico, and they never saw any fighting, and none of them were even wounded. But Conwell sums up his service this way: he was a brave and obedient officer, and he had the respect and love of those who served under him. After he got back from the war, Logan ran for his first office, clerk of Jackson County, and he won. But before he could take office, he led a group of vigilantes to recover some stolen horses, chasing the bad guys down to Missouri. He didn't catch them, but he brought back the horses, and on the way he came down with this terrible disease, pain shooting all through his body. At home he was bedridden with fever and headaches. His father diagnosed the disease as rheumatic fever and doctored him back to health. However, as you will hear later, this malady would haunt him for the rest of his life. Once he recovered, he took the office of county clerk, but within a year resigned, went to Louisville University and enrolled in the study of law. The valedictorian of his class said, "Although I secured the valedictory, I think Logan left the school the best lawyer in the class." And he was known as a great debater in the school. When Logan returned to Illinois, he found his father had built a new 3-story brick house. The family lived downstairs, and the 2 top stories were operated as a hotel known as Logan House. Not long after law school, Logan threw his hat in the ring for election to prosecuting attorney of the 3rd District, which he also won. And in 1852, to no surprise to anyone, Logan entered the state's political arena by running for a seat in the General Assembly. It's the same seat formerly held by his father for 4 terms and by his uncle for 1 term. As a legislator, he exposed his hostility to African Americans. He opposed a bill that would allow blacks to testify in court, and is quoted as having said, "It was never intended that whites and blacks should stand together in equal relation." Logan proposed a bill that would prevent free blacks from migrating into Illinois. It passed both houses of the legislature quite easily and became known as Logan's Black Law. In November of 1853, his father passed away at 65, but he had provided Jack with an education, wealth, prestige, influence, and lessons that only other men his age could envy. 1854, Lincoln was running for the Senate, U.S. Senate. Logan got 3 votes in the legislature and forced Lincoln to allow another candidate to take the office. Logan blocked Lincoln from going to the Senate. Logan, though he was a state legislator, he still had to make a living, much as Lincoln did, being on the court circuit. And he was said to be a very savvy veteran of the court. And after court, they'd go out and make speeches on the steps. And Eckelbarger says, politics in Southern Illinois was not only a source of news, it was also a history lesson, a sporting event, and a source of entertainment for all. And Logan understood his role as entertainer, and his speeches were well received and printed in newspapers, and that began the expansion of his exposure to the public. Traveling on the circuit, Logan stayed at the Cunningham house when he was in that town, and he fell in love with young Mary. Mary was just 16 and he was 29, but he said, she turns me inside out. He proposed to her a number of times. She kept resisting him, but finally in November 27, 1855, they got married in the Cunningham house. At the time, Logan had a horse and buggy, a lot of law books, and $300. Mary was said to be poor as poor, but she had a bushel of sense. So in 1856, Logan was running for re-election to the General Assembly. He was giving 2-hour stump speeches. One reporter said, if anyone ever heard thunder, argument, and sarcasm dealt out by the wholesale, they have an idea of Mr. L's speeches. According to Conwell, at this time, Logan got another one of his nicknames. He was called by one of his colleagues in the legislature the Black Eagle of the South. The title was suggested by his vigor and independence as well as his dark complexion. Near the end of 1857, the area's congressman named Sam Marshall told Logan in confidence that he would not run for election in 1858. Logan knew the one man most qualified for office was himself. Logan's hard campaigning led to his nomination, and he easily defeated a poorly organized Republican. And as Conwell tells it, he was so popular that his majority is said to have been the largest ever given in that district up to that time. His teenage ambition, expressed while playing the fiddle on his neighbor's fence, was finally realized. So in Congress, Logan was most known for his positions on issues of slavery and abolition, which were founded in his patriotism and his support of the Constitution. He harangued abolitionists and called the strict enforcement of the fugitive Slave Act. The Republicans, he said, God knows I have differed with the other side from my childhood, and with that side I will never affiliate so long as I have a breath in my body. Now remember this quote later on while we're witnessing the depth of his extraordinary transformation. He rejected the Republicans' notion that returning slaves to their owners was dirty work. Eckelbarger says he haughtily announced to the Democrats that Democrats are willing to perform that dirty work, and declared, I do not consider it disgraceful to perform, dirty or not dirty, work which is in accordance with the laws of the land and the Constitution of the country. Democratic newspapers praised him. Pro-Republican newspapers denounced him, and the Chicago Tribune gave him another of his nicknames, Dirty Work Logan. In 1860, he campaigned for Douglas against Lincoln, and even bought a newspaper that endorsed Lincoln to stop its publication. At this time, he also met U.S. Grant, who was in Southern Illinois recruiting men for a regiment. Logan asked to address the recruits, and Grant was reluctant to let him do it, but he gave another one of his great patriotic speeches, and Grant got a lot of new recruits. When the war broke out, Logan told Lincoln he wanted to join the Union Army, but Lincoln said that he needed him as an orator who could sway Democrats to support the war effort. One of the myths about Logan is that he fought at the Battle of Manassas. Actually, he and some other congressmen went out to witness a skirmish at Blackburn's Ford. Logan did try to stop a retreat of some Green soldiers. He took up one of the rifles and fired a few rounds and helped some men off the field that were wounded. He finished the day with his face blackened by gunpowder and his hands covered with the blood of other men. Back in Washington, Logan was even more determined to leave Congress and join the Army, so President Lincoln finally granted him a commission as Colonel of Volunteers. As soon as Congress adjourned, he went back to Illinois, to his hometown, where he was greeted by a crowd of 2,000, most of them waiting for a violent demonstration. Logan used his best tool, a stump speech that lasted 2 hours and quieted the crowd. He closed by saying, "The time must come when a man must be for or against his country, not for or against his state. I, for one, shall stand or fall for this union, and shall this day enroll for the war. I want as many of you as will come with me, and if you say no and see it in your best interest and welfare of your homes and children in another direction, may God protect you." One spectator said it was the most powerful speech I ever heard John make. One man who came with a sack of bricks intending to disrupt the speech ended up shouting, "I'm with you, John." On the other hand, Logan's brother Thomas opposed him and tried to raise the Confederate regiment. Another brother, Bill, became a vocal critic of Logan, and worst of all, his mother rejected him completely, blocking him from her door, saying, "Go away from my house, John Logan. I never want to see your face." Wow. His sister Annie shouted at Logan as he marched through the town on the way to war, "Damn you, I hope you will be killed before you get to Cairo." And she would and she ended up in a fight with Mary, who was with her. And she would openly oppose her brother for the rest of his life. His first battle was under Grant. They went to Missouri to attack this Confederate army there. Logan was the least experienced colonel in the group, but he was sent by Grant to break through a Confederate trap. So Logan starts out in his first battle being at the front. He rode in front of his men. His horse was shot out from under him. He saved the day for the Union, although he lost a lot of men. As a consequence, he was praised by the soldiers, the officers, even Grant, and also the enemy. Sketch of the battle and a map of the battle. So, on February 1st, 1862, Logan received orders to prepare his regiment to move out at 2 a.m. the next day. There was no time to see Mary, so he wrote her a letter that was very different than any others. For the first time, he expressed doubts that he would survive. Here are his words. "My dear wife, God only knows my fate. I want your prayers. Never before did I know how to love my own wife and child. I would give the world to see you once more. I may never have such pleasure again. If I should fall, take care of our child, raise her right, and learn her to love the memory of her father. Tell mother and all the family goodbye for me. I can write no more. I cover this with tears." So while the army in the east was wintering, Grant was on the attack. The next battle was at Fort Henry. Logan again was the first into the fort, but the battle had already been won by the Navy bombardment, and the Confederates had skedaddled up to Fort Donelson. Unlike Henry, though, here's some images of Fort Henry. Unlike Fort Henry Donaldson was on high ground and surrounded by earthworks, and if the Union was going to take it, men were going to have to die. The Confederates tried to break out, so Logan was sent to stop them. His command was at the front. Many of the men had suffered over the night from rain and snow. They dropped their tents and coats and everything on the march, and so a lot of them got frostbite and like that. But Logan got wounded 3 times in this battle. He was left for dead on the battlefield. Mary was reading in the paper 2 days later about Grant's victory at Belmont, saw the column heading on the next article that said, "Colonel Logan dead." Stabbed her in the heart. Following day, she got on a train and went to Tennessee to recover her husband's body and bring him back. Found that he was alive on Grant's ship, and she stayed there for a number of days and nursed him back to health. So Logan was sent home to regain his strength, and he learned at the time that Grant had written to Congressman Elia Washburn telling him that there were no generals from Illinois being promoted, and that among the colonels commanding these regiments or any other, a braver or more gallant man is not to be found than Colonel John A. Logan. So Logan got promoted to brigadier general. Congressman couldn't hold a rank above colonel, so he had to resign his seat in Congress. Here's the Union side of the battle. And this is the Confederate side. You see Bedford Forrest was there, and Albert Sidney Johnson, some other guys. So after that, Logan was assigned to Halleck's army, who he thought was plotting. He said, "This advance was perhaps the most ludicrous feature of the whole war." He called Halleck recklessly overcautious. While in Mississippi, however, Logan saw firsthand the reality of slavery, and this begins his transformation as a man. Serving under Halleck was really the low point, and he thought about quitting the army. Despite all these troubles, he had another bout with his rheumatism and had to go home, and Mary had to nurse him. But Grant again wrote, this time to say that there were no major generals of any worth being promoted, and that he had some that would add weight to the cause. Conspicuous among this latter class is Brigadier General J.A. Logan. He has proven himself a most valuable officer and worthy of every confidence. There is not a more patriotic soldier, braver man, or one more deserving of promotion in this department than General Logan. So that promotion was approved, and it was twice in a year that Grant actually got Logan promoted. So now Logan's come back to the Army. They're on the Vicksburg campaign. There were a lot of skirmishes leading up to it. There was a Chicago Times reporter, and I can't hardly pronounce his name, Sylvanus Cadwallader, was riding with Logan because he always wanted to be the first into the fight. On the 15th of May at the junction of Vicksburg Road and another road, Logan was upset to find Colonel Alvin Hovey's division in front of him on the road. Logan aired his displeasure in what Cadwallader reported was one of the finest exhibitions of single-handed swearing that was ever listened to by mortal ears. The entire vocabulary was exhausted. New expletives coined by scores and hundreds. And the changes rung upon them until he was physically worn out. Or so Cadwallader thought. For when General McPherson rode up a few minutes later. Logan repeated the entire tirade. I missed a quote earlier from Belmont about Logan nicknamed the 31st Illinois the Dirty First because they were always in, and because of his derogatory nickname from Congress. But there was a soldier that said from another Illinois regiment, there's not a meaner bunch of men in the Army, and they can swear like nobody else. And Eckelbarger said, yeah, but they can fight as well as they can argue and swear. So, Battle of Champions Hill, Grant actually lost the battle. It was a Confederate victory, but it enabled him to keep Pemberton and Johnston from uniting, and Pemberton had to go defend Vicksburg by himself. During the siege, Logan's division took heavy casualties and faced the strongest Confederate fortification called Fort Hill. Logan felt he should suffer with his men, so his headquarters was at the front, so close to the rebels that Grant used it for observing the Confederate defenses, and Logan was wounded by a rebel bullet in his thigh while sitting at his desk on a chair. After a lot of bloody, ineffective fighting, Grant decided to blow a hole in the Confederate earthworks. Of course, it was Logan's men that dug the trench. I think I had, oh, that's Champion Hill. There's images of the trench. Unfortunately, the ton of black powder they used to blow it up was too powerful, and it created a crater which trapped the soldiers trying to cross it. When the dust cleared, Logan exclaimed, "My God, they're killing my bravest men in that hole." In fact, 200 of his bravest men died in that hole. And it was McPherson who got the credit for ending the carnage, but a biography of Logan says that it was Logan who rode his horse into the crater, organized the men, and led them to safety. When Pemberton finally surrendered, Logan was ordered to lead the Union forces into Vicksburg. Full of pride, Logan wrote to Mary, "The victory is the greatest triumph in modern history. My division has immortalized itself in the eyes of the Army and has universal praise." Grant called Logan a prompt, gallant, and efficient officer who is as competent a division commander as could be found in or out of the Army. Dana, Stanton's assistant secretary, agreed, telling Stanton that few served the cause of the country more effectively than Logan, and none serve it more faithfully. Grant honored Logan by appointing him military governor of Vicksburg, and he was responsible for paroling 30,000 rebels. But 2 weeks later, Grant rewarded Logan again by giving him a leave. He was supposed to go home and rest. But Logan doesn't rest. He made stump speeches in support of the Union and the war effort, and as a consequence, his popularity rose, and his image, his service in the war, and his political speeches were given national attention by periodicals like Harper's Weekly. In March of 1864, Lincoln put Grant in charge of all the Union armies, and the trickle-down meant that Logan was now in charge of Sherman's 15th Corps. In less than 2 years, Logan had gone from a green colonel with an undermanned regiment of 600 soldiers to commanding a corps of 17,000 men. And Eckelbarger says that corps was arguably the strongest corps fighting for the North. So Logan came back, joined Sherman for the Atlanta campaign, and the 15th Corps was on the front. At the Battle of Dallas, which Logan's Corps was holding a 1.5-mile line, he was attacked by Hardee's Corps. According to Eckelbarger, this was a singular moment for the 15th Corps, which had revered Sherman but never cheered him. One Union officer said he had never heard a general cheered in his life. But on this day, as Logan rode up and down the line, yelling at his men, "Fall in and forward," the men began cheering. As an Iowa soldier said, John A. Logan came riding down the line with his hat in his hand, looking like the very god of war. No one can describe how Logan looked in battle any more than he could describe the raging of the sea. I am satisfied that the biggest coward in the world would stand on his head on top of a breastwork if Logan was present and told him to do so. People in the North got a glimpse of Logan in battle with a sketch of his ride, was published in the next Harper's Weekly. 40 years later, a veteran said, "It was without question the most inspiring and magnificent example of personal magnetism and personal leadership I witnessed during the war." So on the 17th of July, Jeff Davis switches out Joe Johnston for John Bell Hood. And on the 22nd, Hood attacked the Union forces on the right flank. Of course, it was Logan that was there. Casualties on both sides were heavy. Hood lost 5,500 men that day. But one of the Union casualties was General James McPherson, who was Logan's commander. Stunned by his commander's death, Logan used it to rally the Union forces to repulse the rebel attack. Again, Logan rode the length of his line, back and forth, moving in reserves and filling gaps while calling McPherson's revenge. Eckelbarger spends most of 6 pages telling stories about this battle. Instead of just cheering him this time, the men started shouting his nickname, Blackjack, Blackjack. Pretty soon, the whole regiments were chanting his name. So after the Union held and forced Hood back into Atlanta, one Buckeye soldier recalled, if it had not been for John A. Logan, the Battle of Atlanta would in all probability be whistled now in a different tune. And a Captain Thomas concurred, saying that that day was a grand victory for Logan, and every soldier thinks of him as he looked on that occasion when the 15th, 16th, and 17th Army Corps, obedient to that electric voice, changed from disorganized forces to a victorious army. So McPherson was dead. Logan assumed his command but didn't get the promotion. He wrote to Mary and said, Sherman and Grant don't like or only like West Point men. So the promotion was given to Oliver Howard. However, a correspondent from New York who had been with the Army since Chickamauga said that neither Grant nor Sherman were the Army's representative. In fact, he said, the real representative man of that remarkable Army was General John A. Logan of Illinois. So, although he was disappointed, he didn't quit. He went on to the next battle. Hood attacked the Union line near a chapel called Ezra Chapel. The sudden attack caused a real breakdown in the Union line. Sherman heard the firing and said, it's exactly what we wanted. Let Hood come to us. Tell Howard to invite him to attack. Apparently, he still had confidence in Logan's tactics and spirit as he left Logan's corps to fight the battle alone. The Confederates broke the Union line, but Logan quickly acted to fill the breach. A brigadier general reported that like a thunderbolt, he rushed to the spot. He filled the air with oaths, and he struck at least a half dozen retreating soldiers with the flat of his sword to redirect their wayward course. He then seized one of the regiment's flags and bore it forward to the Union line with 2 regiments following him. Colonel Williams, the commander of one of those regiments, was awed by Logan's restoration of the line. Later he said, hence, I have always claimed that the presence of General Logan at that point was equal to a brigade sent to the right place at the precise moment. So once again, Logan stopped the rout, produced a victory. Logan lost 560 men that day. He inflicted more than 3,000 casualties on the rebels. Logan said it was the hardest fight of the campaign. The history books give the credit to Howard, but Howard said, I never saw better conduct in battle. The success of the day is as much attributable to Logan as to any one man. Even Sherman agreed, reporting to the War Department that Logan had acted with bravery, skill, and Moria, and gave him credit for the victory at Ezra Chapel. Here's images of Logan on his horse at the Battle of Dallas, again at the Battle of Atlanta, and there's Confederate generals. Another image of the Battle of Atlanta, Ezra Chapel, and General McPherson being shot off his horse. Oh, I added this slide just the other day. That photograph is over there in one of the frames, and it was sold to me on eBay as an original photo. I go, they couldn't take pictures of motion. So I was showing it to some people at the Southern California Roundtable Alliance meeting, and one of them said, "That's the Atlanta cyclorama. That's the center frame in the cyclorama." Logan commissioned it, and he's the largest figure. All the Union generals are recognizable, and all the Confederate generals are blurred and unrecognizable. And there's lots of stories I could tell, but not for now. After Atlanta, Stanton wanted to send Logan to Missouri, but Lincoln wanted to send him to Illinois to stump for him for president in '64. He went back and his first speech was attended by 10,000 people, split between those who loved him and those who hated him. He told the crowd, "And yet I am asked to vote for McClellan and Pendleton. Gentlemen, I won't do it." About Lincoln and Johnson ticket, he said, "I am for these men whether I have a friend left in the Democratic Party or not." Logan was seen as a traitor to the Democrats, but Lincoln's reward was that he carried the election by 30,000 votes, which is 12,000 more than he got in 1860. Logan really resented Sherman, and he wrote to Mary about quitting the Army, and so while he was in Illinois, he campaigned for the U.S. Senate, but he was defeated by Richard Yates, who's a former governor of Illinois. Logan comes back from Illinois and joins the march through the Carolinas. He stops the Army or tried to stop them from burning Columbia. He led the Army in the Battle of Bentonville. On April 9th, Lee surrendered, and 5 days later, Lincoln was assassinated. Looking for revenge, the Union troops wanted to destroy Raleigh, but Logan was able to stop them this time. On April 26th, Johnston surrendered to Sherman, and the war was over for Logan. Except General Howard abruptly left the Army, so Logan finally was given command of the Army of the Tennessee and ordered to march them to Washington for the Grand Review. Logan was welcomed by crowds as one of the most famous and recognized men who helped save the Union. Eckelbarger says the war transformed Logan from an obscure and controversial congressman to a bona fide hero, on whose name alone conjured up the image of the long raven-haired general whose raised hat, flowing locks, and tremendous mustache adorned the pictorial newspapers that covered the battles. On July 13, 1865, Logan mustered out his Army of the Tennessee and ended his military career. His farewell speech, given to 30,000 men, assembled in perfect ranks, lasted for 4 full hours. Logan praised their sacrifices, their heroism, their fallen comrades, and the honors that they had earned. He closed with this memorable admonition: "In relinquishing the implements of war for those of peace, let your conduct ever be that of warriors in time of war and peaceful citizens in time of peace. Let not the luster of that bright name that you have won as soldiers be dimmed by any improper act as citizens, but as time rolls on, let your record grow brighter and brighter still." Here's a couple of images of the Grand Review Washington. So after the war, the Union soldiers formed the Grand Army of the Republic in Illinois. Originally, it spread all across the country eventually. Logan joined it right away, and he was the third commander-in-chief, and he held that office 3 separate times. Their ranks grew to 80,000 there in Illinois, and at the 1866 election, Logan ran for an at-large seat for Congress. The GIR helped him win by nearly 55,000 votes. Logan returned to the House a radical Republican, a far cry from the Democrat that he was when he took office in 1858. Logan earned a new nickname, Bloody Shirt Logan, because he campaigned giving bloody shirt speeches, blaming the Democratic Party for all the ills of society and the their unpatriotic role in the Civil War. He also pushed for suffrage for the freed slaves, strong federal enforcement of Reconstruction of southern states. He gave one speech saying, "Now I want some Democrat to give me a reason why a Negro should not vote. A gentleman in Congress says a Negro does not belong to the human species, but they are made the same as you and I, but they are black. That is all the difference. If they are not made by the hand of God, I would like to know by whom they were made. If you won't allow a man to vote because he has black skin, you may have the right to say, I shall not vote because I have black hair. I don't care whether a man is black, red, blue, or white. He has the right to say who the men shall be that control the government." Logan opposed Andrew Johnson. He actually went to the White House and threatened him, saying, over a vetoed Freedmen's Bill, "I am going home, Mr. President, and I shall make a speech, and I intend to talk about that veto, and I intend to antagonize you in no uncertain language." When Johnson fired Secretary of War Stanton, Logan led an effort to impeach him. The impeachment failed, but Logan's star rose all over the North. And there were even newspapers endorsing him for president, but he said, "I am not a candidate, nor will I be." And in fact, he nominated Ulysses S. Grant at the Republican Convention in May of 1868. Also in May of 1868, Logan, as commander-in-chief of the GAR, issued General Order Number 11, which created Decoration Day. It instructed all the GAR posts in the nation to go out on May 30th, strew flowers, and otherwise decorate the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion. In part, he said, "If other eyes grow dull, other hands slack, and other hearts cold in this solemn trust, ours shall keep it well as long as the light and warmth of life remain to us." Eckelbarger says it was Logan's grandest of ideas, and Logan himself said it was the proudest act of his life. So Grant and Logan had disagreements over patronage and civil service reform, and for some reason over Cuba's revolt against Spain. In Congress, Logan sponsored a survey of the West, which resulted in a mountain in Colorado Rockies being named Logan Peak. My previous times I've given this, I had a picture of a mountain that looked right for the name. I found out doing some research this time that one's in Canada. It's not named after our John Logan. This is the actual one in Colorado. It took me some searching to find it. The Canadian one seems to be more popular. In 1870, he finally got elected to the U.S. Senate. In 1871, despite opposition from his friends and neighbors, he voted for the Ku Klux Klan Act. His supporters outnumbered his detractors. His hometown newspaper praised him, saying that Senator Logan is the most popular man in the state of Illinois, has been several times abundantly proved. In 1872, he disappointed the Liberals. He stumped for Grant, as only he could, through 7 states before crowds as large as 20,000. 73, he built his mother a new house. They reconciled, but she passed away within a year. Also during 73, he was burdened with financial problems, 4 scandals, and the recurrence of his rheumatic fever. 1876, he campaigned for Union veteran Rutherford Hayes, who won by the slimmest of margins. Due to a shift in the Illinois legislature, Logan lost his seat in the Senate to Judge David Davis, to the delight of the newspapers, whose headlines read, "Logan is left and goodbye John." In 1880, he was part of a Republican triumvirate that supported Grant for his 3rd term. Garfield was nominated, and of course Logan stumped for him. In the early 80s, he still can't escape his financial problems nor his rheumatism. He and Mary take a trip to the western states and were greeted by large crowds, causing talk of a presidential run in 1884. Logan continued to be more progressive and votes for civil rights reform. Civil service reform. He was a patronage guy, up until recently, but now he's switched camps. In 1884, the Republican Party was still split. Logan was among 5 candidates for the nomination, but he only got 63 votes, which he gave to Blaine, and was rewarded with the nomination for vice president. He campaigned hard on a special train, making 15 speeches a day, 6 days a week. To boost the campaign, Logan spent $42,000 on a cyclorama portraying the Battle of Atlanta. You've seen a piece of it, but it wasn't completed until 1885, and again, I loved it. The anti-corruption wing of the Republican Party bolted in the 84 election, went for Democrat Grover Cleveland. Despite the loss, Logan's political stock was high, and he was told that if the Republicans could have won if the positions on the ticket had been switched. So people felt if Logan had been the presidential candidate, they might have won. Others were saying, let's get ready for 1888. There's an image of the cyclorama in its new home in Atlanta. In 1885, Logan was returned to the Senate. When he arrived at his home in Washington, he was greeted by several thousand black citizens who serenaded him, congratulated him, and let him know that they would vote for him for president in 1888. He, of course, made a speech telling the crowd that they had been known as downtrodden people, but that he had worked to elevate them, to give them rights that belong to every citizen. He said, they are men, they are American citizens, and they are entitled to all rights that any other man and American citizen is entitled to. He closed by saying, I now invite as many of you as will to pass through this house, which we reside in for the present, that I may be gratified by giving you my hand. According to Echo Barger, 1,000 African Americans took Logan up on his offer. They went through the front door, shook hands with Logan in the hall, passed through the parlor, and out the back door. That summer, Grant died, and Logan was one of his pallbearers. To help solve his financial problems, Logan wrote a fictional book about the Civil War, but it was not well received. His advocacy for funding of education of African Americans and causes his opponents to try and unhorse him. But he was stronger, and his push for the presidency was on. The Logans made another trip to the West in 1886. In San Francisco, Logan was treated like royalty. There was a parade of 10,000 veterans down Market Street, young ladies strewing flowers. One of the attendees wrote, they are making a big fuss over him here. I should imagine by the look of things that he will be the next Republican choice for president. In just 5 weeks, Logan's entourage logged 8,500 miles through 16 states and territories, essentially launching his quest for the presidency in 1888. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. On December 8th, Logan once again became ill. Hearing of Logan's condition, throngs of people stood vigil outside his house. Eckelbarger says the war that made his life was killing him. 3 minutes before 3 o'clock on Sunday, December 26, General John A. Logan dutifully complied with his orders and reported for duty. "He is dead," Dr. Baxter whispered at his bedside. "He is dead." News of his death raced across the nation, and the headline said, "Logan is dead, Black Eagle gone, Blackjack gone." His funeral was on a terrible day. Thousands marched in the snow and cold rain, and there's his mausoleum in a cemetery in D.C. After his death, as testimony to his transformation, Dirty Work Logan was praised by black leaders. One black orator stated, "I think I voiced the sentiments of my colored friends when I say that his name will be honored and revered by them, second only to that immortal Lincoln." A lawyer in Alabama wrote, "We have lost a true friend of the colored race, whose speech in our behalf was as fearless as his life as a soldier and patriot." And some months after Logan's death, Frederick Douglass said, "Of John A. Logan, it is only needed to say that he was the dread of traitors, the defender of loyal soldiers, and the true friend of the newly made citizens in the Republic." To honor John Logan, there's a fort in Colorado and a college and museum in southern Illinois named after him. There have been 5 statues erected to honor him, one in Murfreesboro, Illinois, near his birthplace, one in John A. Logan Community College, one in Vicksburg National Military Park, one in Grant Park in Chicago, and one in Logan's Circle in Washington, D.C. The cyclorama was restored and moved to its new home in Atlanta at a cost of $38 million, and it was opened to the public in 2019. Logan is one of only 3 surnames in the Illinois state song, the other 2 being Grant and Lincoln. But Logan's the only one that was born in Illinois. There's his museum. There's his statues. Logan was a very complex man whose strong belief that he was always right made him a polarizing figure. He went through a major personal transformation in the Civil War, but he was always a patriot who believed in the Constitution and the importance of preserving the Union. He was not alone in his transformation, as the Civil War changed everything for the whole country. In 1860, Logan campaigned against Lincoln and argued for peace. In the war, he was the fiercest warrior for the Union Army. By 1864, he was a Republican who campaigned for Lincoln and fully supported the Emancipation Proclamation. Logan loved his family but spent too little time with them, and his other loves turned out to be politics and commanding armies in major battles. Grant knew that Logan was a fighter at heart, and he said, "Logan is never at peace unless he is at war." Logan fought his political adversaries with the same energy as when he was riding in front of his boys, challenged them to stand and fight for their flag and country. Logan's contributions to the Union victory were well publicized, as were his powerful political speeches. Logan was a divisive personality, but he was also immensely popular. Had he lived a few more years, there's little doubt that he would have had a good chance to win the presidency in 1888. So why does Eckelbarger say that Logan may be the most noteworthy 19th century American to escape notice in the 20th and 21st centuries? Part of it may be just time. Time, kills memories. P. Michael Jones, the executive director of the John Logan Museum in Murfreesboro, says that Logan's early political beliefs and actions coupled with his being an extremely savvy politician and a partisan machine politician, during a time when politics was not a respectable profession, leads people to doubt his commitment to the causes he fought for after the Civil War. That he was an ardent Democrat with racist and copperhead beliefs who made an abrupt conversion to being equally ardent Republican, fighting for equal civil rights for blacks and for funds for their proper education, is simply hard to reconcile for skeptics who see him as just following the political winds. Hindsight does not always yield the best view. I prefer listening to those who knew Logan and judged him by his actions during the times he lived in. The consistency of Logan's efforts and the testimonials of black leaders speak to his sincerity and intensity. I'll close with this observation by Major General Oliver Howard. He was made for battle. The fiercer, the better, it seemed to suit his temper. His personal presence was not only striking but almost resistless. Logan had a good, loyal heart. He sincerely loved his country and her institutions. He is justly enrolled as a hero and a patriot. And that's the end. Thank you for listening. While we're doing questions, here, I bought this yesterday. I didn't get it in time to bring it, so I put this slide in here. Notice how the children are smaller than their parents, but they're obviously adult children. Later you'll see a photo of his son. So there's that. If you have questions, you can read the epilogue. It's interesting about his wife, since somebody got the book for $50. She was a mover and shaker on her own right. Yeah, James.
Did I miss it, or did you skip over the Decoration Day proclamation?
No, I read part of General Order 11. I was going really fast to get this done.
Okay.
I didn't quite catch, where was his father from, like, the States?
I don't know. I mean, it was probably in something I read, but I didn't write it down. But
He himself was born in Illinois.
Yeah, his dad might have been from Tennessee or a nearby state and migrated in. He left his slaves behind. I think Illinois was a free state from the beginning. His mother was more southern. I went through that quote about her slamming the door in his face. She was really violently opposed to anybody who wasn't for the Southern cause. Yes, sir.
I think one of the reasons that he wasn't as well known later after the war is because what happened to Grant the same way is that the Southerners at the time they were writing the historians, and they were writing, what happened in the Civil War, and so he obviously got left out. And I think that could be a reason why he's not as well known.
Yeah, as I've told you before, one of my other speeches, I'm not a Civil War buff. I'm not a student of the war. I don't really read much except for the talks I give. So I have to apologize. I often don't have answers to questions because I haven't done the reading. I'd be curious to read Grant's memoirs and see what he says about Logan. Because in his official reports, he was very praiseworthy. I mean, you heard all the quotes. He got him promoted twice, but he may not appear there, just like Rosecrans didn't appear there and Garfield didn't. All the really popular people who were probably better generals, in my opinion, than Grant was. I never saw Grant riding at the front of the army waving his hat and, getting his men going, but that probably wasn't really his job. Logan was doing a different, and I'm not sure Logan could have led the whole army because he wanted to be at the front fighting. So, yes.
Well, Grant really got stigmatized, and he's finally coming out of that stigmatism because he was drunk and all these other things that they said about him were so horrible. But now you're hearing all these great things that he did. It was probably the scandals that Logan had, and they probably focused on that.
That's right. You know, Garfield had the same problem. He faced a bunch of scandals. They were all, you know, lies. But politics hasn't changed in the history of politics. So, yes, sir.
I was in Vicksburg last month for 4 days, and if you've never been there, it's a great thing to do because you have to see the geography to fully understand what went on there. I saw John Logan's statue, and unfortunately, the battle cemetery there, which is the second largest of Civil War graves in the United States, is not very well kept. I mean, like, they don't even mow the lawn and stuff like that.
Wow.
But the largest structure there was put up by the state of Illinois, and it's modeled after the structure in Rome, which has an open eye at the top. And around the center, the floor is a beautiful marble, and around the walls, every soldier who was at Vicksburg in the Illinois Regiment, their name is there in the bronze, including Logan. And later, Grant's son, who became a general himself, when he visited there as a adult, he said, "Where's my name?" Because during the siege, as an 11-year-old boy, he was there, and he insisted, and you can see where they put into the bronze. It says Frederick Grant, aide. So I thoroughly enjoyed being in Vicksburg, and you can hire a national park certified guide, and it's not that expensive, $25 an hour, and you can really better appreciate all that went on and the suffering and why that battle was so important and why it took almost a year.
Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned the point that he was not a West Pointer,
Right.
and you researched Rosecrans with other people, and there was quite a distinction between a West Pointer and a non-West Pointer in the Union Army.
Oh, absolutely. That much I know because Rosecrans was affected only, he was a West Pointer, but he was a superior student to Grant, and he reprimanded Grant at some point because Rosecrans was 2 classes ahead of Grant. Grant was a screw-up, basically. I think he graduated, near the bottom of his class.
In the middle.
Oh, in the middle, okay. Well, I'm not a fan of Grant, so I'll just...
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Rosecrans. So.
Oh.
Rosecrans was a congressman here in Los Angeles at one time.
No, San Francisco.
And that's the name down in San Diego, Rosecrans?
Yes, that's his only monument, is a cemetery down there. So, any more questions about Logan?